of Zoom reminders. If you experience any Zoom technical issues, please call 1-888-799-9666 and choose option 2. Your audio will be connected through your computer or through a call-in number. If you experience any problems with your audio, just message me in the chat and we can call you in. Submit any questions you have in the chat box at the bottom of your screen at any time. Please turn on your camera and unmute yourself if you are called upon to ask your question, and then mute yourself and turn off your camera after you are done speaking. The Zoom recording, slides, and session summary will be posted on our website, thefdp.org, after the meeting. So now I'm going to pass it off to Jim Luther and Pamela Webb.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us. I'm Jim Luther, and I'm co-moderating today's NSPM 33 session with Pamela Webb. As I was preparing for this session, I looked back, and this is the 9th meeting of the last 11 that we've had a federal panel. That summer, all of our federal panelists have joined us in these discussions. And the only 2 meetings they missed were right in the middle of COVID, where there was a federal panel and they were both but everybody was participating, but it was focused on COVID. So our federal partners have been with us the entire way, including outside discussions and work with committees and working groups as well. Pamela and I did want to mention that oftentimes from a federal openness perspective, they're a little bit conflicted, both in the discussion, the Q&A, because they, like us, are right in the midst of the development and execution of this complex issue, and that'll be the case today as well, as they continue to partner with OSTP and other federal agencies represented here and beyond. As you can see today, the federal panel from NSF, I'm not seeing everybody, so if I miss anybody, please let me know, but Gene Feldman and Dr. Rebecca Kaiser from NSF, Michelle Bowles from NIH, Jason Day from DOD, and Dr. Steve Binkley, and I think Elena, but maybe not Elena Fu. I'm not exactly sure. I think I learned right before this session that she may not be joining us. So that is our federal panel for today. Next slide.
Okay.
The slides aren't up, are they?
No.
Sarah?
Oh, I thought that someone else was going to be.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah. Do you have them?
No, I don't.
Okay, Pamela had them and just got kicked out. So I think Pamela is coming back in. Sarah, I'll continue just in the interest of time.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So what you should be looking at is the session description, the same session description that was out on the website. But this slide was prepared several weeks ago, and we didn't know exactly what we were going to cover. I will talk a little bit about the listening session process, which is a series of meetings with the federal partners about this issue. And Pamela will talk about the OSTP presentation that we did during their engagement hours. But I would refer you to the links on the FDP web page, the opening web page, that has all of the links related to the listening sessions, the OSTP materials, and so forth. And we'd rather have adequate time for Q&A than go through the details of some of those materials. Okay, the next slide is slide 3. You'll see that at some point. This slide 3 is the same slide that any of you that went to the committee updates on Monday, and it just talked about the process as to how we got to where we are. And basically what that is in January of 2022, as you know, the NSPM 33 guidance came out. The Foreign Influence Working Group set up 5 working committees, working groups to focus on each chapter of that NSPM 33 guidance. And we focused on areas that needed additional clarification and ideas for implementation. Those were the things that each of the sub-working groups created. And then and that was in February 16th and February 17th. And then late in February, February 28th, we had a presentation to the OSTP engagement hours. And that we'll talk about the highlights of that if Pamela joins us here in just a minute. That's what she'll talk about. And if not, I'll do that. So, Pamela, are you back with us? Okay, so I'm going to try to share, Sarah, just to keep things moving. Apologies.
She just
Sarah,
entered
can
the
you-
waiting room, Jim.
Okay, great. Sarah, can you let me in? Can you let me share? Hey, Pamela.
You should
Yes.
be able to share now, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Pamela, are you ready to share or should I go ahead? You're muted.
I will try one more time if it happens again.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So Pamela, I just went through the first 3 slides,
Okay,
gave them the overview, and was getting ready to turn it over to you. And if you can bring up the slides and we'll proceed.
okay, if I can get permission to share.
You should be able to.
Is this your first time using Zoom, Pamela?
That's it. It's just such a novel concept. Right, so. It's the first time I've used Zoom this hour. Okay, hopefully, can everyone see that now? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to start by saying that FDP was just so impressed with the NSPM implementation guidance in terms of the clarity and the strength of the statement that was made in that guidance about non-discrimination. And we just, obviously we strongly support that as well, but seeing it here in that guidance declared so crisply and so clearly was just really gratifying. And I know that our scientists appreciate that as well. So thank you to whomever put that in. We know that NSF and NIH have been listening to our input for just years, and the tools that they already have reflect a lot of that input. So we were pleased to see that the federal government doesn't intend to start over, but is really taking the position that that work can be promulgated across the federal agencies and kind of serve as a foundational building block as we work towards these harmonized requirements. We also appreciated the fact that the federal government has committed to working with us for this future requirement on having a research security training program. We know that all of us that have $50 million or more in federal support are going to have that. And in fact, some of you may have already applied to NSF's funding opportunity announcement on developing one or more of the modules for that training. But we really saw the willingness to do this as just being further evidence of the strong partnership that already exists. So we really appreciated that. So the other things that when we went to the Office of Science and Technology Policy and had an opportunity to present at their engagement hours on February 28th, we picked a handful of these points that we thought would be really important to convey to them and wanted to share also with all of you. So you'll probably remember from our earlier thought exchanges, the number one theme that came out over and over and over again was harmonization. Now, I want to make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page on this in terms of harmonization does not mean a one-size-fits-all approach, but it does mean that standardized definitions across agencies are used for standard data elements. And it also means that the definitions are clear enough that we all know what we're talking about. The agencies know, institutions know and investigators know what is meant by a given term and a given requirement. And we also wanted to understand, and we conveyed to OSTP that we wanted to understand the process by which exceptions to that would be granted, both when additional requirements would be added in or needed to be added in, and how those got approved, and whether there was some rigor about whether or not that was necessary and appropriate to do. But then also kind of understanding on any potential violations about how that process would be handled. So we wanted to know who's going to identify a potential disclosure failure. Are we differentiating between a failure to disclose, which may be inadvertent or deliberate incorrect information? What kind of would be those range of consequences and factors? And it was of one particular area that was questioned by institutions was if any violation information, particularly non-criminal, because we understand there's requirements around that, but if violations are going to be shared across agencies before an investigation is finalized, under what circumstances would that occur, and would institutions have the ability to go in and be notified of that and have an opportunity to correct any inadvertent errors in the record before any action was taken? So that was a big issue that we wanted to talk about as well. We also wanted to kind of know what's the institutional obligation. If we're busy working on doing an investigation, should we be sharing that with federal agencies? Can we be sharing that with federal agencies? Because our local privacy laws may have an impact there too. So finally on this, it was a lot of hunger for details. We wanted to know, will there be baselines cross-agency harmonized for the topics that you see here at the bottom, like research security, informed travel security? What should we know about those requirements, and how do we implement them? Then also, we had some ideas that we put out for OSTP to consider, and that includes what I said before, that we should be using standardized definitions for standardized terms. And if we need some customization, let's add a term that's different than that, so we know it's different. We talked about the fact that institutions are going to need some lead time. We need to be able to create our own programs. We need to catch up with new and evolving requirements and give people enough time to be able to do that. And frankly, the last thing is, we know that FDP is the entity that's supposed to be demonstrating piloting on behalf of the federal government. So we're very much hoping for an opportunity for us to be able to do this in this space and serve the interests of our federal partners by refining and tweaking anything that needs to be refined before it is promulgated for all of us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our federal panelists, starting with Jean Feldman and Dr. Rebecca Kaiser, to talk to us more about what they've been doing in this space. Jean, do you want me to show your slides?
Yes, if you would do that, that would be very helpful. Can everyone hear me okay? Pamela?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Yeah. So as Pamela is pulling up my slides, I just wanted to let folks know we're here to talk a little bit about what NSF is doing. And NSF is a little different from the perspective that we have out for public comment our annual proposal on award policies and procedures guide. And so we had to sort of anticipate the NSPM 33 implementation guidance came out, and we had to sort of anticipate NSF's implementation based on the information that we had available to us in order to ensure that we received public comment on what we proposed to do prior to its implementation in January of 2023. So that is what we're here to talk a bit about today for about the next 12 minutes or so, what NSF is going to be doing, and to give you a perspective of the issues we've come up with and how we may engage you in that. So next slide, please. So the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide did have and articulate the NSF implementation of the NSPM 33 implementation guidance. And as Jim has alluded to, this isn't our first rodeo. We have been working on this based on heavy participation and development of NSPM 33 itself, as well as the implementation guidance, how it is that we were going to meet these requirements. And more specifically, we've been collaborating with NIH to ensure our disclosure requirements were as consistent as possible for use by researchers when preparing their biographical sketch and current and pending support. And it really is important to understand that we, in this presentation and others today, really can't get ahead of OSTP in any of the things that are not included in the implementation guidance. So we have to be very careful to make sure that what we are presenting to you is pretty much directly out of what we've received from OSTP. So NSF, NIH, and OSTP are co-chairing an interagency working group on disclosure policies. And what we've done in that is that the NSPM 33 implementation guidance did include the harmonized disclosure requirements for use by federal research funding agencies. And we are in the process, as was alluded to in that document, in the process of developing standardized data elements, instructions, and templates that would be used by federal research funding agencies for the biographical sketch and current and pending support. NSF also, in terms of our PAP guide, for the first time, included a new section on NSF disclosure requirements. And it was the first time that we put something out that said, here is what our disclosure requirements are. Here's what the implications of if those requirements are not complied with, as well as how those are updated throughout our entire proposal and award process. Next slide, please. So what you see here is the latest version of the NSF pre-award and post-award disclosures relating to the biographical sketch and current and pending support. And you'll note that the date on this is April 20th, 2022. What this document does is, you did see the tables that were included in the NSPM 33. However, our disclosure requirements are a bit more detailed based on the fact that we have been, for over 3 years, been getting questions from the community on what do you want us to disclose? What do you not want us to disclose? Where do you want that information included in both the pre-award process and the post-award process? And that's why this screen does precisely that. And again, it is at a higher level of detail than what you're going to find in the NSPM 33 implementation guidance based on the questions that we've received from the community. We have also tried to consolidate not only where it is included in the proposal, but again, where it would be included in any post-award activities such as project reports and the post-award term and condition, which requires the AOR to disclose information that was not included as part of the original proposal process, but should have been. Another column on this table that is of importance is the disclosure not required. That is also in the NSPM 33 implementation guidance, but to consolidate this information in one location, we have included a column on that table, for that information as well. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a bit about the initial disclosures that were specified in NSPM 33 implementation guidance, as well as those that are required after the proposal has been submitted. And again, this was something we had to articulate in our draft proposal and award policies and procedures guide. So at the time of proposal submission, the PI and co-PI and faculty, everyone we identify as senior personnel, have to submit collaborator and other affiliation information, the biographical sketch, and current and pending support. NSPM 33 implementation guidance also talked about providing updates prior to making an award. And so our draft PAP guide identified that as well, that we would be requesting that information. But let me make very clear to you, we fully understand that folks want to move to just in time. And before we make any, implement any major policy, such as the NSPM 33 implementation guidance, we think about it before we do it. And we are having conversations in the building just as we speak on a possible movement to just in time. I have for current and pending support only. And I have to tell you, I cannot be frank enough that we simply don't have the answer to the question right now, but we will be asking prior to making an award for updates of current and pending support information. For many parts of the foundation, that's already a best practice, but we fully understand your concerns about the administrative burden associated with that. NSPM 33 implementation guidance also talked about, after an award is made, disclosures have to be updated. And as many of you know, we have had for a couple of years now a term and condition out there that if the AOR discovers that a disclosure should have been submitted but was not, that they have 30 days to submit a post-award request to NSF. And we're very precise about what kinds of information has to be submitted as part of that. And then at the time of project reporting, PIs and co-PIs must specify whether new active other support has been received in their annual and final project reports. And if the answer is yes, they must attach an updated current and pending support document to NSF. Next slide, please. So what are our remaining issues and things that we need to deal with at NSF? Well, the first of these is implementation of a digital persistent identifier or a persistent identifier PIG. There are different nomenclatures used in the community. And the implementation guidance talked about that and said the agencies have to put a policy in place on that. Well, to anticipate that, what we have done is we have put in both the biographical sketch and current and pending support sections of the of our PAP guide. We encourage faculty to use, and we are now moving to complete use of Science CV. We had a fillable format, and in January 2023, we will be getting rid of the fillable format and requiring use of Science CV. And there will be a field on both the biographical sketch and on current and pending support for ORCID ID. Not that that is the foundation's decision on DPIs, but as we put it in the draft PAP guide, in order to relieve administrative burden and assist with pre-population, we are giving the option for faculty to include the ORCID ID. As Pamela has already mentioned, we are still talking about the research security program requirement. We have added a new section of the PAP guide on research security. We had to kind of punt there because decisions have not been made about everything that would be included in those overall requirements. But what NSF is doing is that we have put out a solicitation. Again, thank you, Pamela. NSF 22576, entitled Research Security Training for the United States Research Community. And in that, we're partnering with NIH, DOE, and DOE to try to find a balanced approach to research security. And this includes development and implementation of training to help institutions meet NSPM 33 requirements. The deadline for proposals is May 23rd. We identified 4 areas that we would like potentially to be addressed in the training modules. Why is research security an important issue? What's a disclosure policy and how will it be used? What actions can federally funded research recipients take to manage and mitigate risk? And is international collaboration encouraged? And so we had a webinar on April 20th. There was incredible interest in that. Over 350 individuals participated in that. So stay tuned for more of that. But we understand that it's a partnership with you. And so we are doing whatever possible to help you meet those training requirements. We also realize that implementation in NSF research facilities and research contracts remains an open issue. And so we will have that issue to address over the coming months. So there is a whole lot more that I could have discussed today, but that gives you just a little snippet of what NSF has done over the last few months. And as you all have questions, I would be happy to answer them later in the presentation. Thank you very much.
Jean, thank you so much. That was really useful. So, Rebecca, I didn't know if you had anything you would like to add to that. I wanted to give you the chance.
Sure, thanks, Pamela. You know, Jean said it all incredibly well. I'm here to support in case anything comes up in questions. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We will take questions at the end, just so we make sure we give everybody a full measure of time. But please go ahead and use the Q&A function if you have it, or save your questions and we will get to you at the end. So I think I'll stop sharing this and turn it over to Michelle Bowles. Michelle?
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm going to say that I don't have a whole lot to add, to be quite honest. That's why it's always great for Jean Feldman to go first on all of these presentations, because she covers the gamut. But for the NIH perspective, one of the things that we are really trying to continue to do is to partner with the other research agencies to identify and master the ability for us to harmonize. We have not been in a position where we have been as successful as we've been in this go round. We've been really able to work with NSF and partner with them for literally over 3 years to harmonize. And you guys have heard me say that over and over and over again. But one of the things that we're trying to do now is pull in all of the details of the NSPM 33 and making sure that our grants policy statement aligns with that. We are in the midst, as we speak, of revising the NIH grants policy statement, and we don't anticipate a lot of changes, to be quite honest with you. A lot of our changes were made in the current policy statement, and so what we are planning to do is to, what I would call, refine and perfect it. In other words, what we think we would like to do is to go ahead and update our disclosure tables to make sure that they align with NSPM 33. We will be adding that similar column that Jean mentioned on what is not required. We will be updating our frequently asked questions because we've gotten a lot of similar questions, and some of the challenges that we're finding is that as our partners, you ask the questions, we're trying to capture them as we hear them, but we need to be able to apply them across the board. So we want to be able to do that in a very cohesive way. We are looking at highlighting the biographical sketch, of course, as well as the changes that will be made in the NIH grants policy statement. But they will not be, the changes that you'll see will only be to, like I said, refine and identify certain spots where the recipients or applicants can go and look in a single location to identify the changes that will need to be made, and to very clearly outline what NIH requires in its disclosure requirements. Largely, I will say that we will not be moving to Science CV fully within this next fiscal year. But at some point, we will be moving forward. So we will still be using our fillable forms. We also have identified the fact that within the BioSketch, we are looking at and working also with NSF and some of the other agencies on consolidating and developing that standard Uber form and instructions. And I think we've taken a lot of time to really go through and identify areas where we all can truly harmonize on those pieces. So any changes that you see within the NIH's application process or the grants policy statement, it will be as a result of implementing NSPM 33. Our goal really is to fully embrace and implement it, and try to do so, like we said, in a way that does not disrupt our recipient community, but at the same time, we will be harmonized with others. As it relates to post-award changes, NIH is aligning just as with NSF as using the 30-day process. And I think we've talked about that too. That'll be very clear in our policy statement if it's not already clear. And a lot of things that we have had to identify in FAQs to make sure that folks understand or understood what we meant when we started implementing some of this before NSPM 33 came out. We will be highlighting and featuring those areas and able to give a full update on the changes once they're made. But for the most part, I just think that this has been a very good exercise. I do agree that there could be some level of additional support and demonstration with FDP and the implementation of it. But I would love for us to be able to work together with you guys in a way that will help all of the agencies, not just focusing on at least NIH, but focusing on how we can master this across the federal research platform. Because some of the questions that we get, we feel that we've answered them. And I tell you guys this all the time, we feel like we've answered them, but if there's still burning questions that you all have, we want to try to get it right this go round. And we want to do that not in an FAQ setting, but more than just an FAQ setting. We want to be able to do that in a setting that is outlined in the policy and that's clear in our instructions. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Pam. I don't have anything additional to add.
Thank you, Michelle. And I just want to invite everyone, I think this version of Zoom does not have the Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free to enter it in chat. And at the end, Jim and I will go back through and try to pick up those questions for our panelists. I think next up, we're pleased to have with us today, Jason Day from DOD. Jason?
Hi, thank you, Pamela. And, you know, I'm going to also second what Michelle was saying, in that I'm glad that Jean went first because, you know, I don't have to go through all of the things that she went through. But what I will do is maybe highlight some of the ways in which DOD is maybe a bit different from some of the other agencies, and what our plans are for implementing the NSPM 33 implementation guidance. For starters, I would say you know, you look at the disclosure tables that are required in the implementation guidance, and I think it's very similar to things that NSF and NIH have been doing. I think for the department, it can vary pretty widely across the DoD components. I think that this is going to be one of the areas where it may be very beneficial for DoD to go through this, because we fully intend, once there are, you know, common forms and resources available, to implement those across the department. And I think that that'll be a degree of standardization that we haven't seen before. And I think for a lot of those in the community that work with DoD, that will probably be very helpful. I'm sure that when we come out with policies for implementing forms, they may not be specific enough because we haven't had to you know, require that degree of specificity. So and this will be a common theme throughout this, but, you know, as we're developing these things and as we're implementing, you know, please reach out to either myself or Pinju Nair, who's my boss in Basic Research Office. But we need to know if something seems like it's not quite clear enough, or if maybe it's diverging a bit from what's written in the NSPM and the NSPM implementation guidance. That'll help us out. You know, apologies for the siren. This is, you know, work from home. One of the things about piloting a lot of efforts is that we're not going to get it right the first time, and so that's one of my messages to the community is just please let us know if you see something that doesn't seem right. In terms of how we're actually implementing our policies, there is a internal DoD policy document that we're working on that will do, I would say, most of the things that the NSPM implementation guidance asks of federal agencies. The one thing that it won't do is go into detail on a DPI policy because the department is still trying to work out what its DPI policy is going to be. You know, and we'll come out with we'll make announcements as we have information available on that. But we wanted to move out on everything else, and so to give you an example, the disclosures that are required from components are the disclosures that are that you will find in the NSPM. This also sets sort of top line guidance for the components, because, you know, while the NSPM says what you should collect and some other things about consequences and information sharing, it doesn't really say exactly what components should do with this information. And in the department, we want to make sure that we, you know, protect what we think is important in the research enterprise by setting clear policy guidelines. And among those are, one, that we want to minimize time to award in any of our conflict reviews. And because that's important, because we don't want this to tie up proposals for any length of time. This should be able to be done in the same timeline that, you know, a review for intellectual merit is done. Also, we don't want to be penalizing international collaboration. That's another important point for us. So those, you know, those faculty members that have international collaborations, we think that's very important, and, you know, that's where a lot of the creativity, a lot of the new ideas come from. So, you know, if you see anything from a component that seems to deviate from that in some way, then please let us know. And then finally, as the NSPM points out, we want to make sure that there's no discrimination, and either on the base of national origin or race or anything of that nature. So if there are any policies that seem to stray from that, that's another thing that we would like to discuss, and you know, happy to have a conversation about it. So those are the main things that we're going to be putting out, along with the requirements on what is collected, what should not be collected, that Jean walked through. There also, you know, in section 223 of the 21 NDAA, there also describes that there has to be some policy for, you know, being able to correct disclosures and going through some form of due process if there are violations of policies. And so we're also in our policy document, we're requiring all of those things. And that document has gone to our NSTC co-chairs to review and to make sure that that is in keeping with what's in the implementation guidance. And so we intend to be fully aligned with what the other agencies are doing. And if there are any, you know, friction points or things that we need to change, then we'll do that. before policy is clear. I think there was also a question about information sharing, and honestly, that's still something that we're working out in DoD. When do you share information with other agencies on disclosure violations? It's a tricky question, because on the one hand, you certainly can't, you don't want to upset any investigations that are going on. And on the other hand, you also don't want to share information too early if it might be prejudicial. So we take those things seriously, and we'll be developing policies and guidance on that. But I think there are some things that need to be worked out there. But those are sort of the broad strokes of what we're working on right now. And we'll develop more policy guidance as new issues come to light, and as it's clear from the community that there are things that are unclear. In terms of we don't have a policy, I would say, in the department of, like NSF does, of making policy changes, putting them out for public comment. There are fewer mechanisms unless we're doing something that's regulatory, right? If we have with the Dodgers for grants requirements, and unless we're putting in a new grant requirement for research institutions that they have to uphold, we wouldn't necessarily put that up for public comment. But as components are piloting things, and you saw examples of that with DARPA in the fall, if you see things that that seem to not be quite right, then again, please reach out to us. Please reach out to whatever component is issuing those things, and we'll have a conversation. And we look forward to engaging with the community. And with that, Pamela, I think I'll turn it back over to you for now.
Thank you so much, Jason. Really helpful. So, and from there, we'll turn it over to Steve Binkley and hear about DOE.
Okay, thank you, Pamela. Also, let me first mention that Paulina Fu, who's been really active in this area for Department of Energy, has been detailed over to National Security Council staff. And Jess Bannock, who's also on the call today, has taken over her duties, and he'll be, part of the process moving forward. And then also echoing what both Jason and Michelle said, I think that the presentation that Jean gave was very, very thorough and comprehensive. Within DOE, we are committed to harmonization in this area, and for us, it's still pretty much a work in progress. We're very, very closely following what NSF and NIH are doing, and I would also echo that the issues that Jean brought up at the end of her presentation are definitely on our mind as well. And then also echoing what Jason said, as we get into the actual implementation steps, remember that the Department of Energy is a fairly large organization. There are many different pieces of DOE that fund work in universities. And so to the extent that you see any difficulties or problems in the implementation that DOE follows, please get in touch with us, because we do intend to really serve the community as well as possible. And I'll stop there, turn it back over to you, Pamela.
Thank you, Steve. So we'll move on, I think Jim is going to ask the first question. If you would like to ask your question orally, we'll run through ones that we've already received in chat. But if you would like to ask one orally as well, feel free to put the raise hand up, and
Hey,
we will
Pamela.
call on you after we're done with the chat ones. Jim, you want to start?
Sounds good. And Pamela, you're breaking up a little bit. Your video is frozen, at least for me. So just to let you know. I'd suggest that everybody take a look at the chat. There's a lot of the questions that have come up that have been answered. I'm going to try to zip through them real quick. Pamela, if you can help me, if I miss anything. I asked a question about Rebecca's presentations over the last couple of months about malign elements of certain relationships. And Rebecca, would you like to add more to your response, Rebecca, about
Sure.
what that is for those that might not be familiar with that?
Sure. So I know there's been a lot being discussed about foreign talent recruitment plans, and we have a definition of what an overall foreign talent recruitment plan is in NSPM 33. We have information that they need to be disclosed in the NSPM 33 implementation guidance. What we've been working on through an NSF working group is having a distinction between foreign talent recruitment programs overall and malign ones. And malign ones that have certain terms and conditions that a researcher needs to sign up to that are very concerning, that breach research integrity, that compel them to do things that might be against the policies and sometimes laws of the funding agencies, the US government, and their home universities. So that's something that we're working on. And the good thing is there is language in draft legislation, which conference is now determining whether it's going to be in the Bipartisan Innovation Act, to define what a malign program is. And then kind of determine what to do about that. The draft legislation says that these malign ones may be prohibited. We'll see if that goes through. But certainly I think having an overall definition to distinguish between malign and other programs will be helpful, I think, to the community.
I think that's great, Rebecca, because years ago, I think we were asking for a list of entities, right? And entities would disappear and come and go and change their names. So now it's about characteristics. And are you saying that the way this this would be structured, this would be beyond NSF, right? Is this something, is that correct? It'd be an OSTP guidance or something?
Well, the way that the draft legislation right now has it to be for any US federally funded research. So yes, it would be broader if it's in the legislation. And if it's not in the legislation, I think it'll be a further conversation with OSTP about how this would manifest itself in policy. That hasn't really been decided yet. So certainly there's more discussion. I think coming up with a definition overall is going to be helpful. And then, as you said, we need to decide the guidance around that.
Sure, and if you're not comfortable in answering this, it's fine. But it seems to me that it might be a useful tool. Those characteristics might be a useful tool today for institutions to use in their communication with faculty and guidance and so forth. Right? Okay.
That's
I mean,
exactly
they're pretty
right.
Some of them are pretty straightforward. Okay.
They're pretty straightforward, which is why I really like to give it out in presentations. So this is the way we're thinking right now, because it is good just for everybody to be aware of, and at the university level, then determine, maybe this is something that we need to, to account for in our overall assessment, in our assessment of conflicts of interest, and all of that kind of thing. So certainly, if anyone on the line would like a copy of my slides that has this draft definition, I'm happy to provide that.
That would be great. If you could share them with us, we'll post them accordingly. Thank you.
Sure.
Pamela?
Michelle, there was a question for you about if NIH will be requiring Science CV as well for BioSketch and other support, and have that capture the signature of the key personnel. If I understood from what you said orally plus what you have in chat, that you may eventually be requiring Science CV, but it wouldn't be within the next year, if that was right. But you do plan to require signatures of key personnel on the BioSketch. Do I have that right, or do you want to add?
That is right. That is correct.
Okay. Do we have timing for that, Michelle, at all, or just do we know that yet?
We're actually looking at next fiscal year, but it probably will be in January.
Okay.
It won't be at the turn of the fiscal year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jim?
Okay. Yeah, and I'm trying to keep track because some of these have been answered. But Michelle, another one for you. Will NIH, like NSF, also include a field to optionally add ORCID prior to DPI being required as part of the NSPM implementation?
Yeah, I answered that one. Yes.
Okay. And yes, great. Thank you.
And Jean, for you, I think there was a question about the NSF current and pending form fillable template being phased out. And I believe you've answered that in chat that yes, beginning in January 2023, Science CV will be required. Do you want to say any more about that and how it came to that?
That's a great question, because honestly, we get a lot of faculty who still want to continue to use our fillable formats in lieu of Science CV. But we believe that Science CV, number one, we're just huge supporters of it and what it could do in terms of harmonization. But also, we are working with Bartray Wick to build in the NDAA 2021 Section 223 certification requirement. And that is what will enable the foundation to meet that requirement, because Science CV will build in the certification as the form is downloaded when it's completed. Not people get confused about what downloaded means, but as they finish up their current and pending and bias sketch, they will all be providing that certification and meeting that certification requirement. So to meet that and to be able to comply with the NDAA, we are moving to January 2023. Faculty will use it for both the bias sketch and current and pending support.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, so I'm looking, Alice Doyle has asked a number of questions,
Yeah.
some of which may have just been answered. They're all good questions, I think. Alice, do you want to mic up and ask your questions?
Yes, thank you,
Or,
Jim. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
and I'm
can.
sorry for the questions, but the admin burden for the smaller institutions has just exponentially increased. And so therefore we have this. I could start my video. In any event, my main thing is I'm understanding that the has signed other support at the time of submission. And it sounds like from Michelle Bulls that sooner or later also down the road, they're going to have a signed biosketch. So I get that. Where I get nervous is it sounds every year in the out years of an award for NIH, are they doing the signed other support as part of the Rppr for applicable or not? Maybe every year they just automatically want it, I think. So I want to know, how are we sending that? Is that Rppr? If I missed it, pardon if it was obvious. Is that going by email? Is there an agency database? And probably the same question for the out years of an NSF, theirs is current and pending. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Alice,
Michelle, you look great, by the way. Anyway.
Thank you. So yes, it does make sense. And so it depends on when the changes are made. So in other support, if there are changes, right? If there's additional information that you're going to disclose at the time of the Rppr, then that's where the signature needs to be had there on the new disclosures at that point. If you identify under just in time that there are changes and you're submitting your other support at the JIT stage, then that's where you would make the electronic signature on the other support or disclosures at that time.
Okay.
And then for post-award, it's in between, you know, after the award is made, we're now looking at the terms and conditions. You identify the fact that something, you know, there's been a change and you want to disclose it. Then that does come into the grants management official. We haven't changed that venue. It comes in either via email or if it's something to do with significant changes, you would send it, of course, into the prior approval module in the ERA Commons, and that's where we would collect it at that point. So if it's an email attachment, it still has to have the electronic signatures that is flattened and submitted. So I think for us, what we try to do is identify where those changes need to take place in our table. And so if you look at our table, hopefully we've been clear there. I know that a lot of things have been updated and clarified since we've been working with NSTC and working with OSTP. So I want to make sure that if you find that it's not clear, let us know, and we will definitely go back and make that clarification.
Thank you, Michelle. It sounds like for the RPPR, they'll be prompted in the report. Okay,
that's exactly right.
They are.
And all the angels started singing. Thank you
That's
so much.
exactly right.
There is a specific question.
At
Have you
NIH,
received- yeah, new other support. Bam.
Yeah, at NIH, that's exactly how it will come in. That's
Very, very helpful. Cannot thank you enough.
Same with
Thank you.
NSF.
Thank you for asking the question.
Same thing, Jean. Thank you so much. Very helpful. And I love where you are right now.
No, that's Antarctica.
Thanks,
Pamela?
Alice. So I think we have another question for Michelle. And I'm not entirely sure I have this question right. And I'm having internet problems, so bear with me if this doesn't work. But Julianne is asking for certified signatures now that are on the other support page. Should the signature audit report be included when that's submitted to NIH, or is that just saved at the participating or the proposing institution site only? Because apparently it sounds like some, Juliana, do I have this right, that some NIH ICs are asking for that?
Yeah, thank you. I have noticed one in particular awarding agency, when we do submit a just-in-time, we are being asked to share the certified signature audit report, which just basically confirms the person that did sign it is actually who signed it. And according to the instructions, when the other support updates were released, the way I interpreted the instructions is that we just have some sort of report that's kept at the institute level, and then when asked, we can simply provide it. So I guess I'm just curious, what is in fact the expectation? Some awarding agencies don't ask. It is relatively new. I don't know if they will eventually start asking consistently. Should we include the signature certification audit report with other support pages during the just-in-time or RPPR phase regardless, or is it not necessary? So kind of just to, you know, in going along with everything that's been discussed, just reducing the administrative burden, because if we include it right off the bat, you have it, there's no follow-up, we're done. So yeah, just to get your take on that.
So when you say awarding agencies, are you talking about the institutes and centers within NIH?
Correct.
Okay, so within NIH's infrastructure, we should not be asking for the audit page at the time of submission. If we have questions or concerns, we can come back and ask for that later as additional information, but it's not required. So your interpretation of what we were asking for from the beginning is correct.
Okay. Okay, so then we will
but this is helpful for me to know, because when I go to my Grants Management Advisory Committee meeting on next week, I will be asking questions about that and making sure that it's clear.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly don't want to, in particular, it was NIAID that has asked for confirmation. And so I was just curious to understand like what the expectation is of us at the institute level. So I'll be sure to share that we'll continue doing what we have been doing and hold on to it for now.
Absolutely, and I will provide that additional support to you and any other recipient or institutions as I talk to them next week about what the expectations are.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.
I'm noticing
Thanks,
that
Michelle.
another participant just, I'm sorry, Jim. I was just noticing that another participant said she too was being asked, and I was just wondering if you want to share which IC that was. So Michelle has that information.
Hi, Pam. It's Amanda Snyder. I was the one that I don't know which institute. I'm not sure which institute it was. One of our managers mentioned it to me, so I will find out and let you know.
Thank you, Amanda. Jim?
Great. So I'm going to ask a harmonization question, but in two focused areas. And then I'm hoping, you know, all four agencies can give their quick thoughts on this if it makes sense. And the two areas are, right now, NSF and NIH have disclosure tables that are really helpful. They're pretty aligned in some areas and maybe not in others, but pretty close, but all in all, very helpful. So question one is, do we think they're going to be more aligned, and DOE and DOD, do you have plans for something like that? That's question one. And then question two is around post-award disclosures. Again, the post-award disclosure process is either, oops, I forgot to tell you about a relationship I should have told you about that impacts capacity or other support or something, or I'm in year 3 of a 5-year award and it's brand new and it's a brand new relationship, but I need to disclose it. So the first question regarding the table, and I'll ask Michelle and Jean pointedly, do you plan on making them more harmonized? And then Steve and Jason, I'll ask you, do you have thoughts on creating something similar? So Jean and Michelle?
Well, go ahead, Michelle. You can start and then I'll join in.
Okay, that's fine. What I was going to just say is that absolutely, I think we are planning to align very closely. Jean has had the opportunity really to have this exercise take place during a time where she was issuing her PAP guide. And so for her, I think this has been an amazing scenario. For me, ours came out a little bit before NSPM 33 started, and so, or gave the final guidance. And so we do plan to align. Jean and I are actually connected at the hips, really, on the, you can imagine it, right? We're connected because we've been really working hard on looking at the Uber instructions and the Uber forms and looking at the table. And because this is so much a part of what Jean is doing with her PAP guide, she's raised some areas with us that we will need to be modifying and looking to change as well. So I wouldn't be surprised, aside from the fact that one says NSF, one says NIH, if they are not very, very closely aligned. We just had the opportunity to put ours out just a little ahead of time. And now we're going to go back, like I said in my presentation, and just refine it and make sure that it aligns. And then there may be areas where we might not be able to, but it only would be because there's some sort of regulation, program regulation or legislation that would prevent us from doing that. And I'm not seeing anything, honestly, aside from FCOI, where we would collect things, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. We are connected at the hip. I was just getting ready to say
okay. I'm not seeing anything aside from financial conflict of interest where we would differ. And to be very honest, you guys will be very happy that Jean is not in the direction that we have landed in. So I just wanted to be clear on that. I think for the most part, though, we are definitely in lock and step.
Thank you.
That's 100% what I would have said. The only thing I would add to that is that we continue to get these comments in. And as we do, I mentioned in my one slide, we keep updating. And when we update, I let Michelle know so that she knows what those changes are, so that that can be something. And it is based on feedback that we receive from the community. This doesn't seem to be addressed on the table. How can you help us solve that problem? And so we address it and then work with NIH to see what we could do to continue that harmonization. And as we work through this, the agency reach is getting larger because we're chairing a group on the disclosures and on the templates and instructions, so that we'll all have a great idea of knowing what each other is doing, and to the extent possible, having it harmonized. Again, there are going to be those areas that are regulatory or statutory that will just have to be different depending on the agency.
Great, thank you, thank you. Jason and Steve, any comments in that space?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, echoing what Gina and Michelle were saying, that we intend to be very closely aligned with the other agencies, and certainly any of the requirements in the tables that are in the implementation guidance. We intend to stick to those very closely. I think it's helpful for us to have folks that have already gone through this process, right? Because then we know what some of the pitfalls are, and as much as is possible, we want to be aligned with what NSF and NIH have learned from this, and maybe avoid some of the questions and ambiguities that have, you know, that always kind of arise. I think one of the only differences may be, you know, both Gina and Michelle were talking about Science EV. DoD doesn't currently have plans to implement Science EV. We're still, you know, DoD is like, this is probably the only venue you'll ever hear somebody say something like this, but DoD is actually a small agency when it comes to assistance awards. We're a very large procurement agency, but not a very large assistance award agency. And so we do rely on a lot of our federal partners and sort of piloting these sorts of things, so that we can try to adopt policies that make sense. But maybe somewhere down the line we would go in that direction. But for now, Science EV and some of the other things that for certification collection, we're going to have to think about how the agency does that. But otherwise, we should be in very close alignment with the other agencies.
Great, thanks. Steve, any comments?
Yeah, just to follow on to what Jason said, and we're following very closely the work that's going on in NSF and NIH in those two areas, and so you know, our plan is to try to have the DOE processes be very closely aligned with what's coming out of NSF and NIH.
Great, thank you. So Pamela, before I go to my second question, why don't we jump to another question in the chat, and then we'll jump back to that.
Sure. Well, as we talk about the requirements for other support and bioscheduling very similar, then we have a question in the chat about, if there's full alignment between NIH and NSF, does that mean that NIH is going to drop its requirement to produce copies of foreign outside agreements as an attachment to other support, or will NSF start requiring that?
NIH will not drop its requirement.
NSF will not implement that requirement. There you go.
That could not be
very clear.
Thank you.
Now, that does not mean our OIG or someone in our process, if we found something that we felt was necessary, but as a standard part of the process, no, we will not be asking for copies of those contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
That's very helpful.
I don't know if you like that answer.
No, it's clear though. Back to my other question, especially in the context of NSPM 33, which was really talking about violations and enforcement, and talking about self-disclosure, talking about lots of different things. There are good reasons and not so good reasons where there might be post-award disclosures. Good reasons might be I submitted a proposal, and at the time there was nothing to disclose, and since that time a relationship has changed and now I have to disclose it. In other cases, I didn't know I needed to, and upon further reflection, it's clear. And I guess the third bucket is I absolutely should have done it, and I forgot to do it, and now myself, my institution need to report it. So again, Michelle and Jean, you are generally, I think, aligned philosophically in how to do that. And any comments? And then again, Steve and Jason, I'll ask you if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Well, from an NSF perspective, we do try to outline, and this is an area of confusion. It really is. So post-award, we have the two categories. We have the oops that you've been describing. We found out something. There is the term and condition in place. And then being very forward thinking, actually NIH and DOD got added to the Rppr a question on, is there new active other support? And that's the vehicle that we're asking you to use if you get new active other support at the time after an award is made to provide the information at that time. And NSF requires that at that time, as you know, when you're submitting a proposal, it's all senior personnel. After the award is made, the Rppr specifically calls for PIs and co-PIs, and that's how we collect that information at that time.
Thank you. Jason and or Steve, anything to add?
I would just say we don't have a specific policy on that as yet. I think that using the Rppr is what makes sense, and if we need to put something in place NSF or DoD wide, then we would do something like that. But that seems to be the most appropriate place to put something if there's new support coming in that needs to be disclosed. The NSPM goes as far as to say, you know, that agencies can require updates as necessary. We just want to make sure that those aren't too frequent, but the format of those we haven't specified as yet.
Yeah, similarly for DOE, you know, we're following what NSF and NIH are doing, and you know, we'll parallel their course.
Okay, thank you. Pamela?
So Michelle, don't turn your camera off quite yet. We've got another question that kind of relates to that same topic, but I think really the requester is just asking for confirmation of understanding of the requirement. And that has to do with the fact that agreements that need to be attached to other support from foreign parties are those that are related to an investigator's appointment or contract and grant activity that is outside of the performing organization. And this person is saying that they've gotten some requests for ones between that are institutional ones that simply are foreign awards to the institution, to that investigator.
Yeah, I actually think I addressed that in the chat. It is between the investigator and the outside and their outside activities, not between a foreign entity or any kind of foreign contract that the institution has with a foreign organization. That's not what we're asking for.
Thank you. And I apologize, in some cases I am repeating in case people hadn't had a chance to see chat. So I want to make sure that got covered. Maybe one more. So there's a question about how sub-recipients should be handled with just-in-time requests as it relates to disclosure information or to the sponsor agency. Non-FCOI, right?
I apologize, Pam. Is that for me? And if so, I couldn't hear you. You kind of went in. And I'm looking for the question just so that I can help you out a bit. I don't see it quite.
Sure,
right
it's
now.
from Tyra. If you want to scan down.
Oh, will sub-recipients
included
to include applications be included in the JET and other requests for disclosure information are sub-recipients to report, disclose up through the parent, okay, or directly to the sponsors agency. So the relationship that we have is with the parent institution. And so anyone that is deemed key or senior personnel needs to report it through the institution. We would not ask that the sub-recipients send us anything directly. Everything would need to come through the parent institution like we've done always. That won't change. And if there's information on a senior key personnel that we need to collect on, that is what would be submitted with the application itself under JIT, or the additional information that you would submit under JIT.
Thank you.
One other point to add to that, which is a question we often get, is, and we're pretty much 100% in sync with NIH. The one question we get a lot is, though, if I'm a sub-awardee, what actually do I report? Am I reporting the whole award, including the award to the prime organization as well? Or am I only reporting our share of it as sub-awardee, and you would only report your share as sub-awardee?
Jason or Steve, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. What was the question?
It's really how you would like sub-recipient disclosure reporting to occur to the prime grant recipient, or directly up to the agency at the various points in the life cycle.
Yeah, I would say that we don't have policies on that at present, and that's something we need to look into more.
So on the DOE side, our preference is to have all of that reporting flow through the institution. So not to do it separately.
Jim?
Yeah, Pamela, I got an email a day or two ago that I wanted to bring up, and it relates to, I think, Michelle, you all have some FAQs about valuing in-kind support and de minimis dollar amounts for in-kind support, especially as it relates to scientific samples that have no commercial value. And then you also, I think, have one related to time commitment for in-kind support. The question was, I forget, Michelle, whether there's any de minimis amount of which below a certain amount doesn't need to be reported for in-kind support. Right, coming up with the value is difficult, but if it's a really small value, especially if there is no commercial value by which to value something, what should institutions do? And, you know, Jean, Steve, Jason, do you plan on adopting NIH's position as to how they manage this type of in-kind support? That's the nature of the question.
NSF does not have a de minimis amount, period.
Well, I don't know what de minimis amount. I'm confused because I don't know where we put a de minimis amount in here. Did we?
Well, no, the question was more around valuing hard to value things, and could you set a de minimis amount?
Oh, okay. You're asking that question.
Asking, that's correct.
Jim,
that's correct.
I was like,
sorry, it wasn't.
Jean has gone out here and changed my FAQs, and I don't even know what's in them now.
No, I haven't.
I just wanted it recorded.
Okay, we have not discussed coming up with a de minimis amount. Unlike our FCOI, which is a requirement, the de minimis is required by the regulation. We have not done that. And I haven't had a chance to really talk to Jean about whether or not that's something that we would do. And I don't know, I think that that's a bigger and larger discussion that we would want to have, not just among the agencies, NIH or NSF or even DOD. I think that's a discussion that maybe we would want to have with OSTP. I think we talked about it initially, Jean, a little bit about whether or not that was something that NSTC, our co-chairs, Mike and Rebecca, but we've not ever come up with a de minimis amount. And I don't know how we would, or what that would look like. So we have not been in discussions that I know of. And we don't, and I'm glad that we didn't have anything in there because I was about to start shaking in a minute. Like, where is the de minimis? Jim, you almost got me today.
Any other thoughts? Thank you, Jason or Steve.
We also don't have a de minimis
Okay.
amount or standard for in-kind support.
Yeah, and likewise
Yeah.
for DOE.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious point is we try to triage the areas of greatest risk, and sometimes faculty ask questions about, you know, should I include this or not? It's not, there's no real material value, and we spend time discussing those things when truly it really doesn't represent risk upon the broader thing. So that's the nature of asking that question. Pamela? I think Pamela might be frozen.
Answer I get from that is
Pamela, can you hear me?
yes. Can you hear me? So okay.
Now we can.
Okay, the number one thing I hear from faculty on that is I have no earthly idea. So when they're trying to value it,
Right.
Unless it's something major like a data set they're purchasing or getting, you know, I mean, sometimes there is, but the vast majority of the time, they're trying to do the right thing, but it's hard for them to know what the right thing is, what to put for that. I wanted to ask another question that came in, basically this is a very forward-thinking question because it's about the research security training. And the question is, when might those modules that are being
So Pamela, you're broken up, so I'll.
okay, good, thank you.
Great. Did everybody get that question? Pamela, you broke up a little bit. The
She stopped in the middle.
Yeah.
I stopped because I thought it wasn't coming through. The question is, when will the research security models that are being developed with NSF funding or federal funding be available to us for use at an institution?
Well, we don't have an answer for when they will be available for use. I can tell you what the solicitation states, which is that we anticipate that they would be completed within a year of us making the award. And then obviously, this is a process where the federal agencies that fund as well, so that would be DOE, DOD, NIH, and NSF, as well as subject matter experts from FBI would be collaborating. It will be those awards will be cooperative agreements. And so, but the time frame specified in the solicitation for completion of those is a year after the award is made. That's about the best I could tell you as of right now. Rebecca, did you want to add anything to that? I don't know if she's still on or not. I don't think so. So that's what the solicitation says.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela, we just have a couple of more minutes here, I think. So want to ask one or two more questions, or are there closing comments, or should we go through questions? I'll ask now. Do you all have any closing comments you want to make? And if so, we want to make sure we set time aside. If not, we'll spend the whole time asking questions.
Not from me.
Okay, great. So I don't think this has been answered, but it's directed to you, Michelle, that there have been reports of institutions being asked by ICs for copies of research awards between the institution and an international sponsor as a result of a disclosure. Should institutions be of the understanding that the scope of required disclosure of supporting documents to include agreements between the awarding institutions and an international research sponsor? It's the question that came in at 2:11 p.m. And down below, Cindy mentioned that NAID has been asking for foreign subawards between institutions and the sub as well. Any thoughts on that?
I have thoughts on it, yeah. I need to work with the ICs to make sure we're asking for the same thing and sticking to the guidelines so that this does not become a complete administrative nightmare. They do reserve the right to ask for additional information if they need it, but as a standard, they shouldn't be asking for it. As it relates to copies of the research awards between the institution and international sponsor, it sounds like they're asking for additional information, or are they, Jamie, are they asking this after it's submitted, or are they asking you as a follow-on to what was submitted? I'm wondering if they need additional information, and that's where that question is coming from.
Hi, Michelle. So they're asking for that information after the submission of an other support document, despite that other support document actually confirming that this is an agreement between the institution and an international sponsor, and in one particular case that the agreement had actually been expired by the time they got to looking at the other support document. So we just wanted to make sure that we're understanding the full scope of this, because we want to meet the requirements, but you know, in looking back at the FAQs and the policy, it seems to be outside the scope of what's needed.
Yeah. I think what they're doing is asking for the additional information, but I'm not sure what's driving that. So maybe what I can find out is which IC is asking, so that I can determine what they're trying to look for. But it is based on the FAQs, based on the requirements outlined in our disclosure table, as well as the grants policy statement and the current pending other support forms instructions. We don't ask for that, so that's in addition to. So I'd like to just find out what institute and maybe help decipher what they're trying to collect.
Yeah, I'm happy to share that information with you offline.
Michelle, it sounds in general that if we have something that appears to be not consistent with our understanding of what the requirement is, we should let you know. Do you want that to go to you? Do you want it to go to a general?
So we do have that other support inbox that we have. We hired a director of policy, Xanthia James, who is actually now monitoring and managing and making sure that our staff are addressing those questions. I would ask honestly that you submit the questions to that inbox with a copy both to me and Kristen. Though Kristen will be out on maternity leave, at least I can track it and place it in my OneNote so that I can make sure that we're addressing them. Just because I think for us, what we try to do is give the staff an opportunity, but if it's a question that is complex, right, I would like to monitor to make sure that we're giving the correct answer, and then taking the answers that we provide to the institutions and sharing them with the grants management community so that all of the ICs see and understand what it is we're trying to collect. It sounds like folks might think that they need just a bit more information. I'm just trying to see what's driving that, because the one from Jamie, that is pretty detailed.
Got it. So, well, I think we are now out of time. So on behalf of all of FDP and certainly Jim and we just want to thank all of you who have come and shared your expertise and wisdom on this. We know that there's so many questions.
Hey, Pamela,
so gracious to not only provide. Yeah. Sorry, you may have to do it too.
You broke up a little bit. So go ahead.
I just want to thank Jean and Michelle. I feel like you guys are midwives. I feel like you have partnered with us to bring to birth processes and as well as awards. And I cannot thank you enough. You don't know how thankful we are as an industry for your guidance and partnership.
Thank you guys. Both Jean and I appreciate you saying that, because by the time this is over, if we haven't choked each other, we're just going to be together forever.
It's gotten ugly, folks.
You're now scaring Jason and Steve. Right?
Well, the good thing about it is they don't have to deal with me and Jean directly all the time. Jean and I don't have a choice. We got to do this together.
That's right.
Thank you all very much. And
Thanks
our
all.
next session will be at 3 p.m. For research.gov updates.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Good to see everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.